Okay, so here we are. This is video number 4 in the Pursuing 50 video series. And today I'm going to talk about something that was a real game changer for me. And that was when I made the decision to redefine what I thought of as bait. We've been kind of conditioned through our reading and through the other ways that we learn about surf fishing to think of certain things as bait. So, if I asked you to make a list of 5, I bet you'd have several of these on your list. Bunker, herring, squid, mackerel, sand eels. You can go on and on from there. But the thing about those bait fish, at least how they fit into the way that I fish, is that they're not reliable. They're transient. They come in and they go out. There's no real pattern to their movements. I do suspect that in places that have more bunker than where I fish, maybe bunker are patternable, but it's not something that I've done. It's not something I know how to do, so it's not something that I'm going to talk about. In fact, in my home waters, when we do have adult bunker in the area, I find them to be more of a detriment. They throw off patterns. They make the local resident fish change their ways. I think that they just kind of stick with those bunker when they move in, and it just throws the bite off. So I'm not a fan of when bunker come to town here in my area. So my definition of bait, which probably may not surprise you, is something that's more reliable. So when I started to ask myself, if I was a big fish, what would I be able to rely on to feed myself night after night? And the thing that I kept coming back to were these bottom species. Things that the guys that are soaking worms and clams during the day are catching. Scup and choggies and sea bass and fluke, and most importantly, blackfish. I have come to really focus on blackfish because they're very abundant, because they're abundant in smaller sizes, and because they're territorial. So they're not moving around. They're not transient. They pick a spot and they pretty much stick to it. So they're easy to count on to be where I want them to be. And that makes it a lot easier for me to count on big fish to be showing up in these areas because I know that they're there for the blackfish. So if you look at this video shot by my friend John Lee, you can see just how numerous they are. When you find a place where they there are just so many sizes in these videos. And there's a lot of them. And you can't tell me that big fish, 30 pounders, 40 pounders, 50 pounders, aren't coming into these areas to pick off an easy meal. And that's why I say that bait makes the spot. This is sort of a little mantra that I've started to live by. These areas, if you watched the last video about the water environment, these sort of oasis areas where there's a lot of water movement that's kind of kicking up the bottom, and there's all kinds of microorganisms and all these things that are building the foundation of the food chain, you start to understand how important that reliable bait becomes. But we also have to remember that the bait fish have instincts as well. So it's not an easy meal. They're not just charging in there and banging away on the first one they see and having an easy meal and going back out to the deep water to hang out. They're probably making several stops throughout the night and just waiting for one of these blackfish or whatever this happens to be on the reef that night to make a mistake. And when I say a mistake, I mean that they stray from the reef a little bit further, or they break away from the school for a minute, or they get distracted and leave themselves open to be, taken down. Something else that's really important to think about is the size. These blackfish are usually, say, between 7 and 16, 18 inches, and you may be kind of bulging your eyes out a little bit at the fact that I'm even mentioning a 16-inch blackfish. But I'm going to put a little bit of a gruesome shot up on the screen here from my friend Greg. This is a 43-inch striped bass that ate a 20-inch striped bass. That's nearly half that fish's length. And so when you think about a fish that's 50 inches long, a GRS pikey is not big to that fish. This is probably average size. And the other thing, when talking about that mistake is what makes plug fishing even possible. The fact that they are waiting for one of these bait fish to make a mistake. If they could just swim in there and eat the one that they wanted, they would never ever come out and eat a piece of wood. I mean, these wooden plugs, as well as they work, they don't look like baitfish. They don't move like baitfish. They don't sound like baitfish. They don't swim like baitfish. But when they're in their environment, this plug, you know, if I'm the fish just kind of going around the edge of a rock and this plug comes in like this, that's how much time they have to decide to react, because they've learned through their experience that if they don't pounce right away, this thing is going to take off when it notices the predator is there and be gone effectively forever. So it's that snap reaction that makes fishing with plugs even possible. And if you look in these videos, you'll see that all of these blackfish are within 1 to 2 feet of the bottom. You're never going to see a blackfish that isn't completely wounded or on its last leg anywhere near the surface. So that's where presentation comes into play. I'm going to talk about that a lot more in a subsequent video. But you know, the basis for the whole presentation thing is getting way down, just getting right down into that zone where the blackfish are most likely to be, and presenting it in a way that these big fish just can't pass up. But it's also important to remember that these big fish wouldn't be there if they weren't having success hunting these areas. So they are coming in there with a purpose to feed, and they're there really for the same reasons that we are. You know, they're looking for a reliable place to provide a reliable meal. And we're looking for a place that provides a reliable meal to these fish so that we have a reliable shot at catching bigger fish. And when you start to put that together, when you start to think, okay, bait makes the spot, reliable bait fish has a much higher probability of attracting repeated chances at catching a big fish, it starts to become a lot easier to focus on the types of spots that are likely to produce bigger fish, and it really becomes a lot easier to target bigger fish. And I think once you get that thought sort of churning in your mind, and you sort of push out those thoughts of needing to find bunker or needing to find some other kind of classic bait fish, it really helps you kind of, you know, filter out the noise so that you can focus on the thing that's really important, and that is that one big meal for that one big fish. And if you can focus on that for an entire season, I really think you're going to have a lot more success with bigger fish.